Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we offer thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. Because if you're joining us today, you probably are a wholesale change agent. My name's Ian Heller with Distribution Strategy Group, and I'll be your co-host today, along with my friend who does not like to be called Jonathan or Dr. Bein. So, Jonathan, from now on, you're Dr. Beinstein.
What if I don't like to be called that?
Well, but you're kind of Beinstein-like. I don't know what else do you know. I mean, what else am I going to call it?
Just skip the doctor part. Let's go with Beinstein.
I'll call you Beinstein. That's fine. I can do that.
I'll call you Albert.
Yeah, the actor Albert Brooks, he's pretty well known. His actual birth name was Albert Einstein.
There you go.
And he changed it. I can imagine why. That's a lot of pressure for a kid.
We have an audience member who suggested Dr. Frankenbein.
Dr. Frankenbein, that's even better.
It's alive.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Jason, look at your name and we don't use names, but Jason, you're not one to talk on this particular pronunciation. So, yes. So anyway, so we've got a really interesting show today. I think there's a lot of talk now about how distributors don't need sales reps. And then there's some confusion because when you talk to a lot of executives, it doesn't square with their experience. And so I don't think they have a framework for thinking about how to reconcile what is often advice that you get from really good consultants and distribution leaders who I think are well-intended, but maybe don't quite understand the nuances here. And a lot of times what you here associated with this recommendation not to have salespeople, or I guess the justification for it is that, well, hey, millennials are buyers and millennials don't want to meet your people, right? And so that's confusing. It's also, I think, not true, and it's not really the main point. So we're going to jump into that today. But before we do, I do want to, first of all, encourage everyone to ask questions. We really appreciate it, and it's very helpful, and it advances the dialogue. We try to answer every question that we get. Please use the Q&A button as we go. And I want to thank Epicor, who has sponsored the Wholesale Change Show since the day we launched it. And Epicor is a well-known provider of ERPs in the distribution industry. And for nearly 50 years, Epicor has helped distributors stay ahead with flexible, powerful solutions designed to increase sales, streamline operations, and improve customer experience. Epicor's industry-leading distribution ERP solutions are built specifically to meet the unique needs of wholesalers with everything needed to grow your sales, profits, and productivity while distancing yourself from your competition. Epicor is focused on the things that matter to you: work queues, PO variance queues, kitting, assembly and production orders, advanced inventory forecasting, VMI, and special project pricing. They build their software using industry best practices and 50 years of distribution experience. But Epicor solutions are far more than just tools for pick, pack, and ship. Fully cloud-based with a modern UI, Epicor offers complete, robust e-commerce solutions, powerful BI and analytics tools, modern API and EDI, value-added services, WMS, virtual assistants, and much more. You can learn more about how Epicor helps thousands of wholesalers succeed by visiting epicor.com. So thanks very much to Epicor. We appreciate it. And let's start jumping into some of the content. Are you hearing this as well as I am on a regular basis, Jonathan, that thanks to millennials in buying positions, distributors don't need sales reps anymore?
Maybe not to that degree, but directionally, absolutely. And,
right.
You're aware of the work we've done in shopping and buying, and it certainly bears out that younger folks are more digitally oriented, but right. it's painted as too much of a black and white picture, and leads to bad decision making as a result, which is, I think, where you're going.
Yeah, it's an oversimplification. I don't think there's any doubt that millennials don't have the same desire to socialize and go out to lunch and golf as other generations do. Although if you look at just for the heck of it, I looked up, how much do millennials golf, and they actually still golf a lot, right? And there's some suggestion that they just want to do it for fun less than for business. But that's speculation. The data is that they're still doing those kinds of activities. And I think that, go ahead. Sounds like you.
Well, but I think the other thing is that the younger generation is simply more proficient at using digital technology.
Right.
People that have our hair quantity and color have all been schooled by our children on some part of technology that we don't know how to use.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, but keep going.
And it's often got a sort of an okay boomer, undertone to it, right? So that is just a fact. If I want to get something, if I want to ask a question about technology, I ask a Zoomer, I ask my son. So
yeah, but I think you're actually getting to the reason behind the reason.
Right. Okay.
Right? So it's not so much that millennials don't like people or don't want to meet with us. It's that if your business is all easy stuff to buy online, then you don't need sales reps for that. Right.
That's right.
And so it's really not so much about the buyer as much as the method
or the product.
The complexity of the value proposition. Right. So if we jump into this for a second, and so for you podcast listeners, I will explain what we're sharing. We are looking at something called the distributor relative value model, and it's really just a complexity scale, if you will. And so the two dimensions are how complex is the product and the services and information attached, or services and information requirements that are attached to that. So do you have complex products that require service and a lot of information? So these may be, stuff that you're selling into factory automation, or power transmission products, or plastics that get, cut and shaped for every order, or hydraulics, or, any one of a number of things that distributors sell that require some expertise or some services or some expert information or training. So if you sell, the more of that stuff you sell, the more complex the product and the total value proposition is, then the more you need sales reps. The other dimension is logistics complexity, right? So if the customer's requirements are just, ship it by common carrier, put it on UPS or the Amazon delivery fleet or FedEx or whatever, well, it's not a complex logistics requirement. Anybody can do it. If your customers are looking for customized delivery, so maybe that might even be things like I need scheduled PO deliveries to the factory for my Kanban, or I have a need for construction products that come onto a job site with a job site forklift on the back of it, or
controlled storage.
Right. Yeah. Cold storage or management expiration date material. There's all kinds of stuff that distributors do that's not just a simple, pull a package out off the shelf in the back, put a label on it and ship it out the front on a common carrier. And so as that value proposition and that relationship gets complex, then your need for a salesperson to manage the relationship becomes greater. Now, there's also a scale thing, right? So if you have a big company and you're going to have 100 buyers and 10 different accounts, that's hard to set up on your own, right? You might need a sales rep to help you do that. But for those simple, non-complex transactions, there is no need for a sales rep. And that's really the driver of whether or not you need an account manager, not the person's age who happens to be placing the order. Make sense?
It does. Why don't you just summarize it one more time for our listeners? Because I think it's really important to get these dimensions. It's key to the rest of the discussion we're going to have.
Right. So, okay. You want me to just move on then?
Well, yeah, but just summarize what the dimensions are again. So the logistic dimension and the product service information dimension.
Okay. So these are about complexity. How complex is the nature of the product, including the services that you offer, and how complex are the logistics requirements of your customer base? So for example, I was at my last job, I was, VP of marketing at HD Supply Whitecap, now Whitecap Construction Supplier, Whitecap, which is a construction supplier. And we had very complex products, right? So Many of them had to be delivered as part of a job site package that we quoted for a specific location. Many of the products were unique to that customer's location. The mix of products for every job site was unique. And they have a bunch of big flatbed delivery trucks, a lot of which have a job site forklift on the back with big tires. And it's hard on a big construction site to know where do you deliver it, because UPS is going to give it to the first person who's going to sign for it, and the job site superintendent needs you to find him or her or their trailer or whatever, right? Or the part of the job site where the product needs to go. And a lot of these products are actually specified, right? So they're selected by engineers, and sometimes they're rental products, and that is a complex environment, and it requires a salesperson to coordinate all that. And in fact, if anything, term sales rep undervalues the value add of the people who are doing this, because they actually become construction process and construction industry experts. Now you add to that the safety requirements, right? The suppliers offering training on how to comply with OSHA requirements and make sure your people don't get hurt. That's a very complex environment, and sales reps are, and for as long as I can foresee, essential to build relationships and support job sites in the construction industry. And that's just one example. There are others in manufacturing and others. So does that example help?
Yep.
Okay. And so it's about complexity. It's about complexity of products and services and information, and complexity of logistics requirements. And the more complex the relationship or the set of customers needs, the more you need a sales rep. And if you don't have that stuff, if you're just selling, simple transactions online, then your requirements are pretty simple. You need, let's see, if you just want to be a pure e-commerce seller, you need a broad assortment. You need to make it really easy to order. You need, fast, small package delivery. You probably need to do some things like order notifications, and you don't need a sales rep for any of that stuff, because your demand generation is more about SEO and email marketing, and customers don't have a lot of questions. They're just ordering because it's pretty simple stuff, pretty simple transaction. And, distributors have a growing part of that business, but for most distributors, it's not most of their business. Is that fair?
Absolutely fair. Yes.
And so I think for the distributors on the call, you need to figure out, and if you're on the podcast, feel free to just ping us with an email, or you can go on to distributionstrategy.com and get this graphic that we're showing. But if you want to get an example of it, but you have to figure out for yourself how much of your revenue is falling into different parts of the complexity map, right? Do you have a lot of revenue in highly complex area? Or do you have a lot of revenue in the non-complex area? And frankly, the stuff in the non-complex area is really vulnerable because of the players down there. And so what you'll also see is, just for, I think, we put some on the chart. We put some example services that, because it's like a 3x3 grid. So we've got some that require a lot of logistics complexity, but not product complexity, and others that are vice versa. And sort of figuring out how your revenues break out on this map is a way of understanding your vulnerability, your exposure to pure digital players. Go ahead, John.
And as we've discussed, if we look at the $7 trillion distribution GDP market, it may be the case that a significant portion of that 7 trillion is closer to the non-complex end of the spectrum, right? It might be that 4.5, 5 trillion of that is in the non-complex end of the spectrum, and then 2 or 2.5 trillion is at the more complex end of the spectrum. But the challenge here is to figure out how you get not only the complex transactions that you're already serving well, but you're able to drag along the non-complex ones, and you don't lose them to disruptors, right?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on that. One is, you and I talked to the CEO of a $1 billion company, distributor that we won't name, either the CEO of the company, who told us that, first of all, he completely agrees with this model, that maybe 5% of his revenue is in that, very simple, non-complex in terms of products or logistics side of the complexity model. But he also said, if I lost that business, I would probably lose all my profits because those orders have much higher gross margin and are much lower cost to serve. And so you can't just concede it. You have to go after it.
Right.
And here's where doing away with your sales reps becomes a big problem, because you're not going to win that business by going head to head on your e-commerce capabilities. I mean, you need to have great e-commerce capabilities. You've got to make it easy for those customers to buy. But if you compete with, Amazon and Walmart and Amazon Business and some pure digital distributors just on digital terms, they'll beat you because they're better at it. Your secret weapon and your method for getting that business is by having great sales reps who help you get the complex stuff. And along the way, they persuade the customer to place their non-complex orders with you as well, because it's part of the deal, right?
Exactly.
And so I think, so sales reps, ironically, in our view, for many distributors, are the way you get those simple transactions, because they allow you to build a relationship that's very essential to the customer, very important to the customer. And so part of the deal is that, hey, when you need the small tools or the MRO, that's easy to buy, make sure you bring that along. Make sure you buy that from us, because that's going to be a part of your earning future discounts or rebates or whatever. And also, we're going out there anyway with this complex stuff. So if you need something, just add it from our website to the order and we'll throw it along with you. You won't have to have a second delivery and more delivery costs. So the sort of the irony in the messaging here is that by suggesting you don't need sales reps and you should focus on digital, many distributors are putting themselves in a position where they can't sell the complex stuff and they can't get the digital. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have a listener who's just asked a question. Are the differences between selling activities and account management activities relevant? What do you make of that question, Jonathan?
Well, I think there's getting the business versus managing the ongoing relationship. I think it may, if I'm reading it correctly, it may break down to hunter versus gatherer. Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think what he means is that a sales rep does both, right? So a sales rep is selling and also managing the account. So let's come back to this in a minute, because I think we're going to talk in a few minutes about sort of, well, what kind of salespeople do you need today then to win? Because certainly the bar has gotten higher. Let me just see. Okay, so I think this is the last slide before we turn off the graphics here for a little while. But basically in what is on our graph, the non-complex stuff is in the bottom left corner. And our point is that if that's all you're doing, those sales, actually, no matter what you do, those sales don't typically need sales reps. They don't need branch support. They don't need most of your services. They don't even need telephone service. You can't call a lot of these pure digital players to place an order. And so you're not bringing to bear the differentiating things that you do. And so let me stop this for a minute and let's talk about this question we got. So all of us have been around salespeople who were just had an extraordinary ability to close deals, write contracts, get, build relationships, make customers want to buy from their company. And, let's call that selling. Let's call account management an ongoing process of understanding how you meet more of your customers' needs over time. And I would say that your salespeople need to be both. Do you agree?
Yes, and there are different models of getting new accounts versus growing new accounts, right? Some yes. Organizations treat those as separate things. In what you described, they may be the same person.
I think they usually are. I think they usually are, right? And
right.
So, and I do think that even if you have a salesperson who is great at closing deals, over time, to grow that account, they're going to have to continue to add value.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, we talked before the show about the article that was written by Forrester, Andy Hoare in 2015 called Death of a B2B Salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, the title of this talk, The Rumors of the Death Are Greatly Exaggerated, is a rejoinder to Death of a B2B Salesperson, right? Death of a B2B Salesperson said, look, there are consultative salespeople. That is a growth area. There are going to be more employees who do that work. And if you look at the other extreme, closer to order takers, but there are a couple of other categories as well, those categories we're going to be losing employees over a 5 or 6 year period. So the only growth of the 4 sectors, of the 4 segments of salespeople, was the consultative salesperson. In the extreme, the order taking person that maps to our low complexity environment is going to be going away. So what we're saying is, in a sense, even though the title of our talk appears to be in disagreement with Andy Hoare, we're basically agreeing. We're saying, yes, the sales rep who is adding value in understanding solution, understanding product categories, understanding product, understanding application, that is a growth area. And I think if we look at some of the other research that we've done recently, also from State of Shopping and Buying, there are certain sectors that depend very heavily on a field sales rep. In manufacturing and construction, about a third of the time, people said they shop with a distributor sales rep. Much less of the time do they shop with a manufacturer sales rep. So clearly, those sectors depend much more heavily on field sales. By contrast, the retail trade sector respondents in our survey, only 15% of them said they shop very frequently with a distributor sales rep. I'm curious what you make of that when I tell you the construction and manufacturing depend twice as much on a field sales rep on retail, and how it pertains to our discussion here.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, look, if a retailer is buying from a distributor to resell something, so it's a hardware store buying from a hardware, third-party provider like Oracle or somebody like that, they're replenishing stock, right? They don't have to talk to a salesperson to do that. If someone's buying
there's not a solution in that scenario, right?
Yeah.
Particularly.
No, right. I mean, I'm just replenishing. And if I'm a regular customer of Staples and I need more janitorial supplies, I don't need a salesperson or break room supplies. I don't need any help placing those orders. They're simple products. I've like a demand history I can rely on. But if I'm a manufacturing customer and I'm looking for MRO to support a large plant, it's a mix, right? Now some of that I don't really need any help with, but then some of it I do. And some of that MRO is actually used to help in production, right? So cutting tools and abrasives and safety products, et cetera. And I may have a vending relationship or a bin replenishment relationship. I'm not going to go online and just set that up. I need someone to come in and look at my needs. I need to do a bit of an audit of my processes, and same with the electrical distributor selling into a plant, or a safety distributor selling into an industrial or construction environment. It takes some expertise to evaluate the customer's needs, and that is where distributors can offer value, because those big players who are the disruptors don't want to have any variable costs in their model, so they're not likely to start adding salespeople and services and all that stuff. And sort of the irony is if you look at the advice that's been given distributors in the last, say, decade, 2 constants have been: the more digital revenue, the better. And you don't need sales reps anymore, right? Those have often been paired up. Mm-hmm. Well, if you actually pursued those strategies, you would wind up eliminating everything that differentiates you from Amazon Business. right? So you would close your branches because you don't need salespeople. You don't need anywhere to put services together like, kitting or custom stocking or whatever. And you would fire your salespeople and you'd become a pure online player with a huge disadvantage to big digital players.
Right. So you would be more clearly in the crosshairs of the big disruptors like Amazon, right?
Correct.
I mean, you would be aligned entirely with the crosshairs and what they're focused on.
That's correct. So you need to have a great website for those simple purchases because customers expect it. If they're going to buy from you online, it's got to be an easy and pleasant experience, and it's got to be reliable. You got to do all that stuff, right? Their expectations are high. We know that. But it's not true that your strategy should be to drive that number up as high as possible, because then your strategy is going to force you or going to lead you to do things that eliminate your differentiators. Because if you're renting equipment, running tools, or you're assembling cables or circuit breaker boxes or cutting plastics into shapes or whatever, it's really hard to do that stuff online. Not that there aren't configurators in some ways to do that. And if that's efficient, it works for you, you should do that. But if the goal becomes a percentage number of your sales online, you're going to start doing foolish things like killing your differentiators, firing your salespeople, and you're going to be following a strategy that's not really meeting customer needs and doesn't help you build things that differentiate you from people who are better at that. Does that make sense?
Let's take a couple more examples. So let's
Okay.
think about an OEM scenario. Let's look at electronics. So Arrow, Avnet, that whole world.
Sure.
Simple or complex sale?
I think that's a complex sale. Do you?
Okay. I do too. And I'm curious, let's sort of tease out what makes up complexity, because we've talked about this before, right? Is it number of line items? Because certainly some of those OEM orders have hundreds or thousands of line items. Is it number of line items? What is it that drives complexity?
Well, I think first of all, those are specified products, right? So engineers are determining what they need. The delivery requirements are often associated with, something around Kanban or, some other production control driven requirements.
Okay.
The mix of products is unique to the production run for whatever you're making. The source, the volumes are very large, right? So I need to have pallets and pallets of some semiconductors and passive components. And a lot of times there's some cross-stocking involved, right? So, and it's a large scale relationship that lasts over months or years, meaning you have to negotiate the price. No one's going to go online and say, send me 1 million capacitors of this model number, right? They're going to say, here's our RFQ. They're going to give it to half a dozen electronic components distributors, and you're going to have to negotiate to be the winner in many cases on a job, right? So that, I don't know, does that make sense?
All of that sounds complex. And I'll add another level of complexity in that particular case. You might be buying literally 1 million of something that costs less than a penny per thing. I can imagine there is complexity in logistic complexity in delivering a lot of very small things.
Yeah, well, in negotiating the price, right? Now, Jason in our audience is asking, is it worth considering situations where there is a difference between initial order and reorders? The first may be complex, but reorders may be simple. I think that's absolutely right. But I also think that if you get the contract up front, part of the deal is you get the reorders. And that's one thing you want your salespeople to do, right? It's a great point, Jason. Thank you so much. But I think, what you're trying to do as a distributor is say, look, the initial order, like on construction products, right? When I was at Whitecap, this happened all the time where, we were supporting the construction of the new Apple headquarters. And then we went out there, by the way, and trained 2,000 employees on site on safety. And that was a huge value add for them. And it got us a whole bunch of new customers who were subcontractors there who weren't buying from us previously, right? So that's the kind of value add that we're talking about. And we coordinated with a bunch of suppliers to come in. You're not going to get that from an online player. Now, those products were specified up front. That was very complex to work through that RFQ, figure out what we were going to order, stage it in local branches, deliver it. and sometimes not sometimes, there are always delays in constructions, the timing changes. And so, but once that deal was done, which was very, very complex, the subsequent shipments were pretty simple, but they were contingent, or they were the fulfillment of the contract that was complex. So I think it's a good point, but I don't think that, the subsequent transactions are out of the scope of the deal, even though they're simple.
I'll give you an extreme of that particular scenario. There are companies who call themselves distributors who also wade into something that sounds a little bit like contract manufacturing, where it ends up being the SKU is actually owned by the customer. Right. So in that case, presumably the distributor who is making that part is the only maker of that part, and then they would in fact get those follow-on orders. Okay, we have a big question here, or big comment. So from Marco, says, no matter how simplistic the purchase in any industry, there's still a huge need for a rep. Okay, we may press on that. Although basic purchases seem simple in a web or digital world, there seems to be much more issues with logistics. Agreed. The reason being is they do not have a rep to handle issues in the back end. And if issues arise, then they go the customer service rep. Okay, so what Marco's saying is it's nice to have a rep in the path there in case something goes awry. This takes much more time to navigate rather than a rep handling the issue. So I guess he's saying going through the customer service route is less efficient for the customer, right? Ultimately costing the organization wasted man hours and less productivity. Reps are not your quote unquote sales reps. They are problem solvers. And there are problems in any type of commerce. Everyone loves to have a guy, and even the millennials would rather have someone to navigate them through something because of their impatience in nature. Please comment.
So his first statement, no matter how simplistic the purchase in any industry, there is still a huge need for a rep. I would say that Amazon's $25 billion sales achievement in 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, would argue that that's not correct. So I agree with most of the rest of what he said, but there are players out there. I mean, Granger's Zorro division is growing like crazy. There's no rep involved in that. So I think Marco's general point, I agree with, that there is a huge value in reps in certain situations, but I think you can't, these simple transactions they don't need reps. And there are players out there who are just going to marketplaces and they're growing at a ferocious rate. So I love that he took the time to write this. He's obviously got some passion about this. I think a lot of it's correct, but I think if you think you're going to get those simple purchases without great e-commerce capabilities, or that, there are people who can get that stuff even if you have reps on those accounts, I think that's a risky assumption.
Let's go back to another question that we had from Jason. He says, it's important to note that distributors should be honest with themselves about the complexity of the products they sell, actually related to the prior question, actually. It's easy for distributors to perceive products as complex just because they are expensive. Great. So complexity and expense are different dimensions.
Right.
And because they have a lot of specifications. But Amazon Business was selling Genie scissor lifts online 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, look, that's a relative. If I know I need a Genie scissor lift and I know the model number, then I don't need a rep to help me pick that out. Right. And so it's an expensive purchase, but I would argue that most Genie scissor lifts are not sold on Amazon Business, because typically if you're buying a lift, you're buying maintenance agreements with it. Right. So I'm going to buy from a local equipment dealer, and that person's going to support the warranty on it. And they're going to do the service. So, okay, you can buy that stuff on Amazon Business, but I think the fact that they had it for sale doesn't indicate that they were getting a lot of market share on it. I mean, I think most of that's going to go to an equipment dealer, because what are you going to do if the thing breaks? Amazon Business isn't going to help you. So you're going to have to get some kind of an agreement on it anyway. And I would be surprised if you could have gotten it for the same price as an equipment dealer anyway. So I understand what he's saying. Yes, there is. Look, none of this stuff is black and white. It's not like there aren't complex things sold on Amazon business. And it's not like there aren't simple things sold by a traditional distributor. What we're talking about is how do you craft your value proposition and your capabilities in a way that you can compete for as much of it as possible.
Yeah, I think the other piece in the note is that distributors do need to be honest with themselves about the complexity of the products they sell.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's easy for distributors to overrate what they sell. I mean, for example, you might say, well, I'm selling technology products. Well, some of those are actually commoditized. In fact, a lot of them are, right? If you're selling printers, if you're selling desktop printers, not a lot of complexity to that. If you're selling, so enterprise printer, there's all kinds of other things that go along with selling an enterprise printer.
Right.
So I think that's a really good point. We've got a bunch of other questions here.
I know they're coming in.
In a business utilizing inside reps, is that what that?
Yes, I think that's
inside reps in multiple territories for our showroom channel. What are some ways to repurpose our internal sales team to meet the newer demands of a digital era? So I think this really wades into the whole question of the distinction between field sales, inside sales, which we often call proactive inside sales or telesales, and customer service, right?
Which most reps call inside sales, even though we don't think it's a sales role.
We don't think it's a sales rep, right? So we think that in this area of people wanting faster transactions, easier transactions, not wanting the hour-long sales call, obviously e-commerce is important, but also proactive inside sales is important. And let's be very clear what we mean about proactive inside sales. It is just like field sales, except they don't get in a car. You might think because they're sitting in a branch or they're sitting in a call center that they look more like customer service reps. They're not. They're just like field sales reps who don't get in a car. So I think, to the extent that you've got a proactive inside sales rep who is adding that consultative value, I think that's partly an answer to what you are referring to there, Eric. The other thing to note is that it is tough. Your question is about repurposing. Ian and I have different numbers on this, but they're both small. The percentage of customer service reps that can make the shift to being a proactive inside sales rep, Ian, you think it's as high as 15? I think it's as low as 5.
Yeah, it could be.
Right. It's a very small percentage of the people that can make that shift. So when you look to repurposing, make sure you're doing testing. Make sure you're getting somebody that's got the right psychographic to sell.
Yeah. So if we lay it out, and this is an oversimplification, but it's a good starting point to understand it. You use outside sales reps for your big customers because they're more likely to have complex needs. You use outbound telesales reps to manage accounts. They're account managers that work over the phone and they manage your bid size accounts, right? So they're not taking inbound calls and placing orders for the most part. They're making outbound calls and they can do it at 1/10 the cost of an outside rep if you add up all the compensation and T&E and all the other stuff and the ability to just be more efficient over the phone. And so they allow you to penetrate into that mid-size part of the business where, by the way, your competitors are probably not going because they're probably focused on the elephants as well. So they're making outbound calls over the phone, but managing accounts, but they manage many more of them per rep at a lower cost. And then what you call your inside salespeople today, you may continue to call them, I don't know, they are really responsible for handling your inbound calls. And you can call that a sales role or not. We call a sales role somebody who has an account package, have an account assignments, right? If they are taking inbound calls, we call it customer service. And the people who are great at that, and make no mistake, these people are essential. They're really, really important to your customers. They're really, really important to you, but they're not salespeople. They don't work on a commission and go out and get new accounts and try to understand their needs and figure out solutions that you can deliver. That's what salespeople do. Those customer service people are taking inbound calls and they're great at it. But so if you work for a distribution company, probably sometime in your past, your company has made an attempt to turn those customer service people into salespeople when they have extra time, right? So somebody said, you know what? Our inside salespeople aren't always taking calls. So let's give them each a list of 100 accounts. And when they're not busy, they should call those accounts and try to sell them something. And it always fails because those people are terrible at that. They're uncomfortable. They communicate that discomfort to the customers. The program peters out. You have 1 or 2 stars who really are good at it. And those are the exceptions in that 5, 10, 15%. And so you go, why can't everybody do what Betty's doing? Betty's great at it. You guys be like Betty. Well, Betty's a unicorn at this. She's one of the few people who can make outbound calls and take inbound calls and do them equally well. But most people aren't like that. So you can't combine the account management and the customer service over the phone capabilities and succeed at it. Is that clear?
I think that's really clear. If you try to do that in a bigger way, if you say, great, I want to have a hybrid proactive inside sales rep and customer service rep, as the proactive inside sales rep gets better and they start selling more, their load is going to grow to a point where they can't handle the inbound stuff. And so those calls will fall to the floor. We have a great related question from Besor. Question is about single point of contact between distributors and customers. Is that usually best?
I'm not single point of sales I mean, look, I don't think interpreted the way that it's written with no additional context, I would say, no, you want to have a different person taking orders and answering questions and expediting stuff and looking up invoices and all that customer service stuff. Then you want to have selling to your customers. You don't want to blend those roles or you're inefficient at selling. And if that person is really, really good at that stuff, they're probably not a good salesperson anyway. And so, but for inbound calls, for big customers, yeah, I think a lot of times that makes sense for the customer service stuff.
Mark Peck would have a slight variant answer on this. He would look at assigning both field sales and proactive inside sales to the same account.
No. I agree with that. Yes. Okay. I didn't want to really get in that complexity, but I agree with you that he calls that integrated account management. And if you don't know who Mark Peck is, he's a genius at this stuff. He's been doing it for 30 years, and he's actually developing the content for a series that we're going to talk about that we're launching later this year. It's a 3-part series on the reinvention of distributor sales. And so he'll get into that. I just think for purposes of this discussion, it's going to get confusing if we start talking about that. But go ahead if you want to.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think we'll leave it there. It's actually, I didn't mean it as an advert for that series, but I think it's a great advert for that series because he'll be talking about integrated account management.
Well, you know me, America's the land of opportunism.
Yes.
So Jason is asking, is there a risk where buyers get the rep to help with discovery, but then buy elsewhere? And related to that, just because the rep shows up on site doesn't mean the buyer is legally obligated to buy from that distributor. Yeah, that's right. I think, yes. So this is always a risk, and it's been happening forever that someone, gets some technical support from you and then they buy from somebody else. I think the better the rep, the better the relationship, the less likely that is to happen. And go ahead.
So let's talk about ways that you drag along the less complex orders with the more complex ones, right? You've made the comment, I think very insightful, that people are willing to split orders these days. We've been trained, we used to think in terms of getting all of our stuff from one supplier. Right. What are the ways that we can drag along the simple transactions with the complex transactions? I'll throw out one.
Yeah.
One is that there's some kind of volume discount that you're getting from consolidating your purchases with a single supplier, right?
Yeah, I'll give you a requirement. You have to make it easy to buy that simple stuff. This is why being great at the complex stuff doesn't get you off the hook for having a great website. You still, when people do want to make those simple orders with you, they've got to have a great experience. You need good product data and integration with your ERP and good search navigation. I mean, all that's, you have to have a great website. Even if you don't want to compete for that simple stuff as a primary part of your strategy, if you want any of it, you need great digital capabilities.
Yeah.
That's different than saying we want as much of our revenue to come out of that simple stuff as possible. So with that as a sort of an assumption going in,
Mhm.
my answer to your question is that in addition to tying it to some kind of discount or rebate, you should have good, thorough, ongoing sales and marketing contacts with those customers. So first of all, they're aware that you carry it, because as we know from our own research and experience, distributors think their customers know what they carry, but their customers don't know what they carry. So if you've ever walked through a warehouse with a customer, then at some point in time, they point to some product that you've been carrying for 30 years and ask you when you added that to your line, because they don't know. So you have to constantly educate them about what you have to carry. So at least you're on the consideration set when they need it, right? And then on top of that, you should ensure that the sales rep relationship is such that the customer wants to buy from them, to reward them for their hard work, and because they appreciate and value the relationship. I think that's often undervalued, and I think it's really important. I've been with sales reps and the customers are apologetic that they don't have orders for them. I don't have anything for you today. I'm really sorry, right? And so they want to reward their customer service and salespeople, the people who are important to them in their business relationships, with orders. They like to do business with them. So I think, you offer financial incentives, you put it in the contract, right? That part of the deal is we're going to bring in inventory to support these projects and you're going to buy it from us. And I think you have to outservice the online players. That might mean that you not only know the products better, but you deliver them faster, or you have them in stock, or they're there for a will call and an emergency. So I think it's just you have to outperform these online players with your own customers.
It's an interesting point you bring up. I was working with a company in the construction space a number of years ago. And as you know, when you got started at Whitecap, pretty much anybody in that space at that time lost 40 to 65% of their revenue as a result of the downturn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they had noticed they had a bunch of customers that were just getting too good a deal. And they decided, well, we've got two ways we can go out of business. We can give it away, or we can not give it away.
Right.
They decided to not give it away. They precipitously raised prices on these customers that were essentially bandits or outlaws. And a bunch of those customers left. But then literally 10, 11, 12 months later, there was this huge spike in the return of those customers, because this particular distributor could get stuff not just to the address, not just to the building, not just to the floor, but to the corner of the floor on the construction site where things needed to happen.
Right.
And the customers decided it was worth paying another nickel or dime or whatever the increment was, to have this quality of service. And this was a logistic value add, right?
Yeah, I've seen this again and again. I mean, my first experience with this was when I was in the Granger marketing department. I started as a truck unloader at Granger, then I ran branches, moved into the marketing department, and the national accounts department had decided that they were going to terminate proactively the contracts of about 80 customers, because those customers refused to take price increases that we needed to make them profitable. Well, they communicated with them that they were terminating the contracts. And I would say 90% of them came back and said, no, wait. We didn't realize you were that serious about it. Let's talk about the pricing, because those services really were essential. They were just negotiating, right? And I've seen that happen a lot. Now, I don't suggest that as a strategy, but that's how it worked in that incident. And I've seen it before, so if you're really the best at what you do, you will earn your business with customers. There's no substitute for terrific performance and a great relationship. So, okay. So let me tell you though, I want to tell you one anecdote. Worst sales rep I ever rode with. And I've ridden with a bunch of them. Okay. So I've ridden with a bunch of them. So I once rode with a sales rep. I won't tell you who he worked for, but I got to his car in the.
Oh, you just told us it was a guy though. That was a little bit too revealing.
That's all right. Well, almost all of them were in the 90s. This was, or the 80s, whenever it was. And so the passenger seat of his SUV was coated in dog hair. And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I usually take my dog with me on sales calls." Really? So I was in a suit at the time. I had dog hair all over me. Every call we stopped at, was a surprise to the customer. They didn't have any idea that we were coming. And he kept saying, I didn't bring my dog today. I brought this guy instead. I know that's a big letdown. And you can see the customers going, no letdown, right? And that kind of sales rep never lasted long. And that's sort of my closing thing here is there never were great account managers who did nothing but drop off donuts and shake hands. They're never, those people, unless you had bad sales management, those people were never successful and they never lasted. So the bar is getting higher now. Your sales reps need to be more like business consultants. They have to have better technical knowledge. They need to be better at evaluating customer needs. They need to help you develop more services so you're more essential to your customers and differentiated from pure digital players. But bad reps have always been bad reps, and good reps have always tended to develop these skills over time. You just have to be more deliberate and focused about it and more demanding of your people. Does that make sense?
It does. So if a rep shows up and talks about his dog, it might actually be the person you're referring to, is what we should take away from this. Yeah.
Yeah. And if he does, tell him hi.
Yeah. Now we have one more great question. Amazon and Granger have field sales reps to drive traffic to their sites. They also focus on key accounts for their business. How do you get traffic to your site unless you have a sales force to drive people to your site and explain to them why they should buy from you? I'm going to take part of that and then love to hear your thoughts. So the research that our colleague Dean Mueller and I have done on e-commerce shows that the strongest ways to drive e-commerce business are through your customer-facing personnel. Your customer-facing personnel, field sales reps, proactive inside sales reps, customer service reps, can make or break your e-commerce initiative, right? If they want to shut it down and not promote it to customers, you're going to have a hard time succeeding. So I would say that when it works right, Marco, you're spot on. The field sales rep is a big proponent of the digital piece and a driving force.
Okay, so the first statement is Amazon and Granger have field sales reps to drive traffic to their sites. Okay, the vast majority of customers for Amazon Business and Granger do not have field sales reps, only the big customers. Okay, so Amazon itself has no sales reps. Amazon Business has what they call, I think they're called customer advisors or service advisor or something, right? Who are there to negotiate the contracts, but they're not there to provide ongoing account management. And the vast majority of customers buying from these companies, I'm almost 100%, I'm 100% certain. The vast majority of those companies do not have field sales reps, only the big companies do. And so a whole bunch of the revenue coming in is not coming in because of sales reps work. So if you really want your non-complex purchases that come through a sales rep to succeed, yes, you want to get them from your big accounts, and that is a sales rep challenge. But you're also going to need to be good at online marketing, like email marketing, SEO, etc. So that's
terrific.
That's what I think. So, all right, shall we wrap up, my friend?
Let's do it.
Okay. So our next episode, because it's the middle of the summer and we have vacations and stuff, is actually on Wednesday, September 15th. We're going to have the CEO of Global Industrial, Barry Litwin. They're on the New York Stock Exchange under ticker symbol GIC. I looked it up since Barry joined the company in, I think it was January of 2019. The stock is up 73%. Business results are off the charts. And they are an online seller, but they also have excellent sales and telephone service to differentiate themselves from people who do nothing but digital sales. So I think you'll be interested. If you're interested in the topic we had today, you should listen in to hear Barry, who's been a very successful CEO at a couple of different companies, a few different companies, and including more and a lot of distribution experience. So that'll be great. We're looking forward to talking to Barry. Then we just announced a new series called The Reinvention of Distributor Sales and Service. I mentioned this earlier. The dates aren't set yet, other than we're going to be kicking it off sometime in October. It's a 3-part series of webinars and reports. You can go to our website, distributionstrategy.com/subscribe to follow us. We will reach you about 2 times a week. We don't ping you every day. And on LinkedIn, you can follow us at distribution-strategy.group. Or you can email Jonathan at jbein@distributionstrategy.com. It's BEIN. Or you can email me at iheller@distributionstrategy.com. That's it for today. Jonathan, it's great working with you again.
Mutual.
Be well. We'll talk to you in about a month. Thank you for coming, and let us know if we can help you. Bye now.